Welcome to the Design Owl GreenHeart podcast, where we explore groundbreaking solutions for a greener future. I'm your host Anish Bajaj, and we have with us today two exceptional change makers from Bihar, India. Prashant Kumar and his co-founder Ben Reid-Howells from the Center of Resilience aim to provide pathways for resilient livelihood, sustainable living, and inclusive well-being for the people, cultures, and ecology of Bihar. A pioneering effort of theirs is to create Bihar's first floating village. They have created a new model of housing that doesn't just float, but is climate resilient and generates new solutions for providing social justice.
So, in this village project, the idea is to create a whole civilization. The idea is to create a whole infrastructure of a village which is ready for what is coming after 30 to 40 years in the world, which we're going to see. Which means the scarcity of water, scarcity of food, scarcity of natural the resources. Overall, the idea was to make it very, very local and very low tech, because floating houses exist around the world, which we see nowadays, and it's $1 million houses. But also we know that floating houses used to exist around the world from our ancestors, and which people have lived in for thousands of years.
We're challenging that narrative by trying to create solutions that are very easy for local communities to understand, to adopt, to adapt to their needs as well.
You can have a clinic which can just go to any of the villages. You can have a food distribution, a kitchen which can go to any villages. You can have a rescue team operating from there to support.
And climate justice reflects the idea that the reality that the communities in the world who are suffering most from climate change are not the same communities who have the most cause of climate change, right?
Before we welcome our two speakers, I'd like to acknowledge the unstinting support of our sponsors, Villeroy & Boch. Villeroy & Boch is a world-renowned bathroom brand constantly implementing new technologies and solutions to help use energy and raw materials more efficiently, reduce emissions, and continuously increase product sustainability, even exceeding laws and requirements. Sustainability is integral at Villeroy & Boch and in its very nature. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Prashant, for joining us on this episode of GreenHeart. What has been the motivation and the impetus behind the Center of Resilience? How did that come about, and what is the vision for this organization?
So Prashant and I were traveling by land on two motorcycles, two Royal Enfields, from India to Scotland, his motherland to mine, on a journey called the Vasudeva Ride, inspired by Vasudeva Kutumbakam, that the idea that the whole world is one family. And we were about to leave India and set out on the international leg of the journey, and we stopped in Bihar, where Prashant is from, to do a small project. And that's when we witnessed the floods of 2017, 18, in these years, these very, very dramatic floods that displaced millions of people. And we said, we need to put this journey on hold and create a project to respond to this flooding. And we built a model of housing that could withstand flooding and earthquakes and was affordable and beautiful and full of sustainable systems. And this became the birth of the Center of Resilience. And the vision of the center is a vision that came from Prashant's work and then mixed with my work and now has become a whole thing of itself. The vision of the Center of Resilience is to create pathways towards resilient livelihood and the regeneration of land, water, cultures in Bihar, and to make Bihar a model for the world of leapfrog forms of development. So now we're focusing that work on climate change and the climate crisis in this world. And that brings us to the Resilient Floating Village Project, or the Climate Resilient Village Project.
What has been the vision of this unique floating home or floating village concept that you have in mind?
I think the reason why I moved back to Bihar was with this idea to bring, as Ben said, like regenerative future and bringing resilience in terms of livelihood and sustainability and other things which used to exist a lot in Bihar, and it's now changing as the whole world is changing. So for me, one was that I am from Bihar, so that was my own calling to this land and do something for my own people. So in this village project, the idea is to create a whole civilization. The idea is to create a whole infrastructure of a village which is ready for what is coming after 30 to 40 years in the world, which we're going to see, which means the scarcity of water, scarcity of food, scarcity of natural the resources, whether it is fuel, whether it is energy. So how our civilization is going to tackle and how the future generation can get inspired from. So what could be a very sustainable way of development where the whole village not just is created in a way that it can sustain with its food energy, but also climate resilient. It can float when the flood comes. It can cool down its own during the heat waves. It can warm up during the cold winters. It can produce enough an amount of food with all the technology, something which is very futuristic, which has all the amenities, but very sustainably designed in a way that it doesn't need a very hi-fi technology to create. It's something which is very low-tech and something which basically our older generations has been practicing. So combining those with technology and create a whole infrastructure which is ready for what is coming.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the prototype that currently has been built in terms of its actual construct and the challenge maybe in creating this first prototype and the learnings that were associated with that?
Making something very new, very out of box, something which people have not thought about or like ever created. Especially in places like Bihar, where infrastructure is not very much ready for that kind of job. Also, coordinating and getting permissions or working around with government to make it happen. So all of that was challenging effort, whether it is from first level of ministries to high level top government officials. But one by one, we solved all the ground level issues. Infrastructure wise, the challenge was to have all the prototypes done and tested and ready about what kind of mixtures we're going to do for the plasters, what kind of bricks we're going to create for this house, what is the methods we're going to use, how it is sustainable in terms of its own build, how it is net zero carbon footprint if we are building it, how we are sourcing out not just material but also technology very locally, how we are making sure that indigenous craft is part of this, the build process is part of this. Overall, the idea was to make it very, very local and very low tech, because floating houses exist around the world, which we see nowadays, and it's $1 million houses. But also we know that floating houses used to exist around the world from our ancestors, and which people have lived in for thousands of years. So getting more inspiration from natural into natural material and more land-based techniques to create this house was a challenge and was a very interesting opportunity as an artist, as a social artist for me, as an upcycling artist for me to dive into and try to create this. It's not just a specific design for Bihar, but it's a global project for around the world because it's related to climate change. So with that intention, I came to Bihar. 2021, we started looking for the allies, the group, people, how we can make it happen, how we'll do prototypes. So we started doing different experiments at the center. By 2022, we created a small unit and we tested that unit at the center in a small little pond with its weight and other distributions. And finally, in 2023, we did the actual build of this house on Ganga River in Buxar.
My understanding for anything that has to float, the challenge obviously would be weight of material, and the weight of the material is directly in contrast to how efficient the system is. Could you describe those challenges in terms of the criteria of selection of material?
Let's discuss this through the design first, that what is the base, because you see the house, but what is underneath the house? So it's 10 feet by 10 feet square, imagine square tiles, which are frames. And these frames are designed in a way under which 12 drums sit. So we use this upcycled plastic drums. We had a partner water studio who had some research on these drums already, that, okay, for 10 years with sun, with light, with outside wear and tear, these drums are able to survive for floating houses. So we knew that, okay, this is a strong material and it's upcycled and it's used and it's available around. So we started with that. We had the metal framing. So we use MS material in this, but it could be GS, galvanized steel, it could be SS to make it more corrosion resistant. So idea was for us to make this happen first, and then we can know that, okay, what material to change to make it superior quality. So for this, the structure was created with metal pipes, and then inside that there are 12 drums in each of these 10 feet by 10 feet capsules. Now imagine we are attaching these frames. So there are total 12 frames and 108 drums, which are making a 30 feet by 30 feet square platform. And this platform is basically what is holding everything on top, right? So each of these drums are roughly 220 liters of drum. And with the amount of surface area it's creating is very strong, and it can take. Now come to the superstructure, which is the house on top. That is designed in a way that it's metal frame for the house with metal pipes, which are not bolted. It can take vibration, it can take a movement, slight movement in there. So with these metal frames, now we have bamboo weaving structure, which you can see is very native kind of work in northern Bihar and this part of the world, where they create the whole wall with bamboo by weaving it in a way that's proper solid. And on that, we have done mud cladding recipe we created ourselves with this mud, which is now, we call it plaster, the mud plaster, and that is both side glided. So with this, we are seeing now it's been a year now, and we left this house completely without any maintenance to just see what is the wear and tear it is taking. And we see a very, very good result with these plasters we have done. No cracks. The house was exposed with like 48 degrees of heat and storms and flooding, as you see in the news right now. And it's doing pretty well. It moves, the whole house kind of moves, and it can take the waves of the water, but doesn't make any cracks. And again, now like this is a kind of lifestyle where you want your house once a year or twice a year do a kind of mud, layer coating, like how our dadima used to do. So creating that part of life is also important, because those are rituals. Those used to be rituals they used to perform before Diwali, before Chhat Puja, or before any other festivals. So idea is not to just build a house. Idea is to build a whole structure of livelihood which is sown with our regional culture and everything which was part of lifestyle.
What did you do about the roof, Prashant? Did you treat that differently?
The roof of the house is similarly created in a very native style of how people in this part do. We have grasses called jhalas in local language. It's like tall grass. It can go till 10 feet, 12 feet, very sharp end. So these grasses are very strong to hold. With these, you can weave them very nicely together to make sure it's waterproof arrangement. It's also insulation. It's quite a strong insulation to stop the heat, direct heat to come inside. But we have also put a tar in between the grass to make sure that there is no extra water droplet can come inside. So everything what we use is basically local jhopadi making technology of Bihar, but just alterating it little more by bringing good mixture and technology to how to build these bricks without baking it, just sun dried, but very strong and capable of building house on land or on the water.
The framing is the MS. You've got this weave of a local bamboo or a local kind of reed which has these plasters on it, and then you have a roof with the thatch. So the bricks are incorporated where? What is the need for?
So if you see the photo of the house, you see there are 3 rooms. And during the build also, I was into a complete trial mood. And what we did, one house is made with the bricks. The walls are with the bricks. The one you see is with the bamboo with mud cladding. And the other one is a bamboo weaved in a very different vertical way with bamboo cladding. So there are 3 different prototypes, 3 rooms built differently with plaster also. If you see the plaster also we have used are different in those 3. During the build season only, few of them fall apart. During the rains, heavy rain happen and things, but few of them just stayed, and we got the recipes. Okay, this is working better.
This was a process to test the different kinds of materials that are there, and then maybe once you actually scale up the proposition, you decide on one kind of material system that you will scale up and build multiple units of. Was that the idea?
Totally. Yeah. This is the prototype. So this is an experiment where we are choosing and testing every part of what works, what doesn't work, and to scale up what will work.
How do you deal with the challenges of electrification, and how do you deal with the challenges of plumbing and sewage? How are those challenges mitigated?
So for the sewage system, it's a dry compost toilet system where we have created it in a way that you are not pumping every aspect of life we need to answer in this prototype, right? So also having this toilet system where right now what we use in the houses of pumping out water, then putting like 5 liters of water into our toilets every time we flush, which goes around the city and then eventually goes to some river. So to minimize that, a new way of system could be, I feel, which could work is dry toilet system, where you use sawdust, you use dry leaves, or you use ashes or any other kind of thing which can absorb the moisture from the waste. And slowly, if you introduce some bacteria, it can start decomposing more faster and it can be turned into a compost. So right now, that's what we are using for this toilet. For the electrical part, we have a solar unit, which is covering the whole house right now. It's doing pretty well from last 1 year. There is more options, and that's the idea that once we scale up, we'll not just look into only solar, we'll not look into only dry compost system. We'll have to think that what are the researches available around the world, which already happened, whether for energy, whether for food growth, whether for all the other systems, sustainable systems, and bring that together into this village which we are visioning.
You touched briefly upon food production in the process of actually creating this floating village system. How is that coming about? Do you have certain kinds of technologies that are onboarded in the design as well to allow the food production to actually take place?
So if you see the whole house, we have kept quite a lot of open area. One is for the cattles. When it's flood time, people can have their cows, buffaloes, and other animals also on top. But also you see around the house, there is open area for food production. Also the roof of the house to minimize the heat temperature. We don't have to experiment and create everything from scratch. There is vertical farming, there is microgreens, there is aquaponics, there is hydroponics, there is permaculture, and there is space in the design we have left. We are thinking of creating a village. We can always have more of these floating structures, which can be also floating farms. So during the flood, you are not worried about your crops going underwater. It will simply start floating also. Once you have a food growth, now the question is how you sustain it. So we built, for example, a solar dryer. So what food produce you have? You try to, again, all of this is right now not in the floating house. That's where we want to go. But we have experimented all of this slowly at the center, and we try to see that it's working. How to create puree out of tomatoes, which can sustain for 2 years without any chemical into it, or how to sun dry all your other food produce so that it can work for 1 year. So these kind of experiments we are already doing for food. Energy wise, again, as I said, it's not just solar. We have to also think about wind. We also have to think about when there is a flow of water, we utilize that to create energy.
What could be possible applications for such a kind of a system? One application, of course, is to deal with climate change. It could also be a technology or a science developed to allow it to have certain other kinds of uses, maybe also recreational uses. Have you considered these areas of application?
Totally, and I think the testing is showing. Now, like first we wanted to create it, test it for a year before even talking about it, that how it is and what it is. So now we see 1 year of successful test. We see it taking all the wear, tears, weather conditions. So now we see if it can be done in the river, which has more flow. It can definitely easily done into any like private pond or any other properties, any other water bodies. So implementation wise, I feel that I'll be more satisfied and happy if I don't see millions of people leaving their homes and are forced to live on the roadside. If that solution can be created, and I see that is adaptation, and those kind of model we can create where we don't have to build and sold houses to people. We have to simply train people how to build this floating rafts, and people know to build their houses. So that way, at least we are able to minimize the displacement during the flooding. And that's only one of many things we do with this house. If you see other perspective, imagine just now, right now we have this house. There is huge flooding in certain part of Bihar. Road connectivity is gone. You can have a clinic which can just go to any of the villages. You can have a food distribution a kitchen which can go to any villages. You can have a rescue team operating from there to support. So whether it is on ground direct support or it is just creating the whole flood prone area, where people know that every year this is a thing, this happens. and a lot of people's houses are getting broken down, or even if it is not broken down, they are forced to leave their farms and field and houses and live in roadside for at least a month. All of this bring individual loss in their livelihood, and that's a loss of a state. And Bihar is already in a loss. Bihar is already in debt from central government from long time. So I think people of Bihar, and what we need here is resilient to everything. They are already, people of Bihar are quite resilient towards whether it is environment, nature, poverty, whatever you see, people know how to survive and they know to how to make their way. So I think this is the best ground where we can test such kind of prototype in the world, not just in India. I feel that in the world, globally speaking, Bihar is one of the great place to test this kind of build and test this kind of things and also adapt. Because Bihar is just simply, it's in the front line of climate change in India. It just because of its geographical location, Bihar is the one which is most affected every year.
Why do you believe Bihar is really at the center of this challenge?
Well, one is its geographical location. We are sitting just at the foothills of Himalayas. There are glaciers above us. When the water from Nepal, from glaciers comes down, it hit the first flat land and the land of rivers, which is Bihar. And you see every year the devastating effect is bringing and is increasing. And second is Bihar's demographic condition. You see how economically undistributed Bihar is. What is the number of population, poverty, unemployment, and all the other things which brings. And simply, if you just Google, you will see, okay, within India, it's one of the first most vulnerable state in India for climate change. And hence it is for the world also because of it, simply because of its population. That amount of population getting affected with climate change is a huge, huge problem to the state and to the country.
And this is where it enters into the story of climate justice, which is a principle that we follow in our work. And climate justice reflects the idea that the reality that the communities in the world who are suffering most from climate change are not the same communities who have the most cause of climate change, right? So we're talking about working class communities in states like Bihar and countries like India, very agrarian, land-based rural villagers being displaced by flooding caused by the global Northwest, right? Who largely have led us to this place. So in our work, one of the reasons we're always working to create solutions that are entirely responsive, based on needs, and offering solutions with ingredients that all local people can access, right? Scrap metal, locally sourced mud, natural materials, is because we believe in climate justice. We are fighting to create solutions that are accessible to the people who suffer the most from climate change and have the least access to other solutions, to alternatives. So everything about the project is aiming to really challenge these global patterns and systems that say, if you have money, you can buy your way out of climate chaos, right? You can rise above the floods, the pollution. But if you don't have money, then your life will be destroyed by climate change. We're challenging that narrative by trying to create solutions that are very easy for local communities to understand, to adopt, to adapt to their needs as well. And this is where the work goes beyond Bihar, because look at neighboring Bangladesh and look at the dozens of other countries in the world and billions of humans living within flood zones or drought zones, right? Or what other forms of water and food scarcity zones. So it's not only a house that floats, it's a model of a village where people remember how to live collectively. People remember how to have a circular economy outside of capitalism, outside of monetary exchange, because we know that along with climate change, many of these systems will also be challenged. Market economies will struggle or collapse as resources become more scarce. So it's a matter of preparing Bihar and offering a model, hopefully co-creating a model that the world can adopt and adapt in different cultures of real holistic resilience to climate change and all the other systematic changes that will come along with it.
What has been the response of society? what has been the response of governments, and what has been the response of other people in the world that have got to understand or be sensitized to this intent of yours?
We have had folks following our work for several years, and we have some international partners who support in different ways. For example, Cohen Althus, the founder of Water Studio that Prashant mentioned. If you ask Google who is the world's leading floating architect, it's Cohen Althus. So he's a partner with us on this project, and we have groups of engineers in Germany who are supporting. And all of these international allies have watched Prashant ultimately do this work on the ground in the incredible complex challenges of working in Bihar, accomplishing a complex project like this in Bihar, even while the river is flooding around his and the team's feet. And the international response has been amazement, really, that this has been accomplished with such a low budget, with such a small team. Eyes are really on this project. People are really around the world are looking at Bihar, are looking at this floating house project and looking at the next steps. And it's also a showcase of Bihari ingenuity. Now, Prashant is such an incredible example of a master Bihari Jugaru, who with Jugaad has overcome so many obstacles that in the West would have brought the project to an end. So I think this whole global perspective on the project is a celebration of that personal Bihari cultural resilience, as well as the sort of climate resilience that we're working towards.
I see that within 6 months of this project, people were quite a lot who were also critical, kind of jumped and become part of the team. They become part of the allies and start giving their ideas. We can solve this by this, we can try this here. So I see a very strong enthusiasm, I'll say.
How mobile is the system in terms of actually traveling on the waters? Have you tested that? And is it able to move about fairly easily?
Yeah, so last year we tested it, and we did a journey. We bought it from Patna to Ara, which is 120 kilometer by river, and it was very smooth in one way. Like with one boat, we were able to push it and direct it. Where in a way, it's not too tough. Like once it's in water, it can be even pushed by human hands if you are on the ground. Best part is that it can float just on 2 feet of water. So it's not that you need too much of depth and then like 5 feet or 10 feet, just 2 feet of water. Even if there is a water level rises a little bit, it will start rising in its own place, making it really helpful for flood-prone area.
What do you see the future of this program being? How do you see the next steps evolving? What is the hope and the wish list, so to speak, for this project?
Hope is that we after this we keep moving and keep creating the rest of the village. So different design, different houses, upcycling and natural things keeping in mind. Also keeping technologies in mind that okay, we can replace this material with for example these waste plastics which are now converted into seed. So what are the other materials we can explore? With that we try to build this whole village one by one, but also really put and test a life on this now. So I think that's kind of desire for this project, and which needs, of course, funding and support system. What we need is really, really strong, visionary support of people who can understand what we are trying to do.
Has there been some call to action where you've maybe announced this idea of inviting volunteers? Is there an effort to actually go out and raise the money and or also create the awareness and create the partnerships and collaborations? Has there been an outreach at your end for that?
So we're just preparing now that we're both in India and both in Patna to host Bihar's perhaps first intersectional climate resilience gathering. And we'll bring folks together from across Bihar, across Patna, folks working in similar fields, and make this call out. Let folks know, look, this is what we're doing, but we can't do it alone. We are looking for funds. We're also looking, as Prashant is saying, for collaborators, for folks who say, look, we specialize in food growth. We can come and manage that part, or we specialize in solar systems. Let us help with that. And that's what we would love. We would love this to be a collaborative effort that brings multiple efforts together, multiple movements and struggles together in Bihar or beyond. So my dream is that we find the right people with these call outs who will join as interns, as volunteers, once we have funding, as with a salary, to really push this project along and bring it to the next level, where we'll need a much bigger team to continue carrying out the vision. I would just say that I think this work is an invitation for other folks in Bihar, other Biharis who have left Bihar for lack of opportunities, to see this example of one Bihari who's come back home despite huge opportunities abroad. And it's the reverse of the brain drain. Now it's incredibly gifted people coming back to Bihar, and more are needed. So all of you Biharis out there who miss your Litit Choka and lovely Bihari Gamcha and Bhojpuri, come back, work with Prashant on the ground. This is the beginning of a new model of global solidarity, working together across borders, and the world is looking to frontline communities like Bihar. This is a chance for Bihar once again to become a center of wisdom and teachings globally, and for the world to look to Bihar for these models that are being developed right now in the face of climate change.
So thank you, Prashant and Ben. I wish you all the success on the Center of Resilience. The work that you're doing is pioneering on so many levels. It's impactful, it's the need of the hour, and it's selfless. It really goes a long way in improving the lives of people and reaches out to the communities that need help the most. So I wish you all the success in making the Center of Resilience a truly powerful organization that's able to mitigate these circumstances of climate change that we have to deal with. Thank you for taking the time out and joining us on this podcast. It really has been a lovely experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.